Okay, GenZ everybody. We are today very fortunate to have an outstanding speaker on a subject which we have chosen to deliberate, which is very current as to how Gen Z have really transformed the system of governance in Nepal, uh, installed a government, have in a way mistreated or treated with violence to those who were in power. Whether this was an abrupt thing or there are otherwise um, forces which were attributed in case of Bangladesh and in other countries. But here, it appears to be, come up in a sudden manner. I, for one, know with little information that even the Indian establishment did not see it coming. Not only Indian establishment, Nepal was also blind, China was also blind. When the people who became transformational in change, even they were not sure what is the direction, what they are doing, and how it all happened. So I think this is something to ponder over, and only a professional can untie the knots related to this issue. So before I request, sir, I'll request Kulsekar to introduce the speaker.
We warmly welcome you, sir, to CENJOWS. It's honor to have you with us. Today is a burning topic, the Nepal political earthquake, from Gen Z protests to the regional repercussions. Professor S.D. Muni is the Professor Emeritus at the School of International Studies, JNU, and the former member of Executive Council at IDSA, New Delhi. For over 40 years, he taught and guided research in international relations and South Asia studies at institutes such as JNU, National University of Singapore, BHU, and the University of Rajasthan. He served as India's ambassador to Laos from 1997 to 1999 and special envoy to the Southeast Asia on United Nations Security Council reforms. He also represented India at the 50th anniversary of the Paris Peace Conference. In 1990 to 1991, he was nominated to the India First National Security Advisor Board. Professor Muni played a crucial role in the Nepalese peace process by helping bringing the Maoist insurgent into the political mainstream. He was also founding executive member for the Regional Center for Strategic Studies in Sri Lanka. He recognized for his work. He received Sri Lanka highest civilian honor award for the foreign nationals and the Sri Lanka Ratna in 2005. He is the honorary distinguished fellow at INS SSL Sri Lanka. He served as an honorary fellow at the Institute of South Asia Studies Singapore to 2020 to 2023. He has written 30 books and published over 200 research papers. His recent book is India's Eastward Engagement from Antiquity to East Active Policy 2019. Professor Muni was also founded editor to the two prestigious journal in India, the South Asia Journal, or remain as the South Asia Survey, and the India's Foreign Affairs Journal. Over the year, Professor Muni has received several honors, including a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Sri Venkateswara University, Tirupati in 2014, and a facilitation by the University of Delhi in 2017 for his contribution to the Indian-Nepal relations. He was also invited to speaker at the United Nations Special Committee on the India's Ocean as Zone of Peace in Sochi in 1985. Thank you so much.
All yours, sir.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. It's for the first time I'm in this center. And the subject is rather complex because things, at least in Nepal, are still unfolding. And every day we get a new information. Therefore, it's extremely difficult to say anything categorical. What we can do is to make assumptions available on the basic information and data which is available. That's what I shall try to do that. But before coming to South Asia, I think we should look at the global context in which these things are happening, because they are not confined to South Asia alone. It's happening in Indonesia, it's now happening in Philippines, it has happened in Peru. So you have quite an extensive spread of such things happening. So three things at the international level we should keep it in mind. One is the growth without equity. Uh, um, uh, Almost everybody is growing, by and large. Uh, some at a lower level, but the gap between growth and equity in terms of the accumulation of uh, benefits and fruits of the growth have been concentrated highly by the small section of people. In case of United States of America also, even in 2008, there was a fault line between 1% and 99%, which means 1% of the Americans were holding too much of the wealth. And this is the kind of distinction everywhere else. You find France also almost boiling now. So this was one factor which we should keep in mind. Secondly, there is a rise of illiberal governments. Under globalization, everybody talked about the liberal systems, democracy, whatever else it is. But they may still be a democratic facade, but the tendency to concentrate power, centralize it, control people, contain freedoms is going on very widely. This is also a global phenomenon. And the third global phenomenon is shift to geopolitics. The whole Cold War was fought, at least in the name of ideology, that we are fighting this way, that way. I think somewhere ideology seems to have vanished. If at all, used more as a rationalization or a camouflage. But the real competitions are for power and influence in terms of geographical parameters. So these are the three phenomena which have taken place all over the world. And what is happening to my mind is under this umbrella of what it is. Now come to South Asia. In South Asia, we have had electoral democracies. We are all democracies, but large concentration is on elections. And coming elections means coming to power and sustaining yourself in power in one. And that being the main objective, besides welfare of the people, etc., beautiful slogans, but the driving force is electoral democracies is to come to power. And for coming to power, electoral systems have been vitiated, have been quite polluted in terms of collection of money, how to use money. And two factors, the money power and the muscle power, become very critical in the electoral processes in South Asia. So the governance systems are deformed and far below people's expectations. Secondly, growth without equity in all the countries. Even Nepal, which was earlier 1.2% or something, in the last 2, 3, 4 years have shown 4.5% growth. So there is a growth taking place, but the distribution is not equal, and that is a big problem. Centralized and authoritarian, despite democracy, Rajapakshas in Sri Lanka were known for this kind of thing. Hasina is blamed for what she did in Bangladesh, and so is Mr. Oli in Nepal. But this is what Pakistan, of course, we know the civil military dichotomy and the military's control all the time. This has affected the governance in one way or the other. And then, above all, the demographic bulge which has come in our countries is South Asian countries, but also. But in South Asia, we have seen a huge bulge of young people coming up. Now, this bulge is, generation-wise, is slightly different. It is far more exposed to the world. It has far better information thanks to technologies of information and exposure which are available. Television, mobile phone, almost everybody is having that kind of a thing. And it takes you to the entire world despite it goes beyond the boundaries. So this is what this bulge is more exposed, more aware and informed, more aspirant. and more confident. Since they know the gap, they don't want to remain where they are. You know, the old parameters of पिछले जन्म में जो किया वो इस जन्म में हुआ is no longer valid anyway. And they just want to get things in this world. And to that extent, they are energetic, they are more assertive, and a lot of initiative on their own part. So this character is something which we must remember. Now, because of this character in all the three countries, what has happened is that this young population has come to the forefront. It doesn't mean that the whole show is off them. There is a widespread disenchantment with what the governments are doing, how they are delivering goods to them. And that has been mobilized, the dissent has been mobilized by this forefront group, which has come, and then there have been triggers for that. Now in Sri Lanka, the trigger was the economic breakdown almost, with the loans, and they could not pay it back. Foreign exchange dried up, prices shot up, people could not afford it, and they took the front line. This is the economic aspect of it. In Bangladesh also, the trigger was that Hasina had kept reservation for the freedom fighters' generations, which meant that the other young people were losing on that part. And it really offended them that why should we be out about it. In Nepal, almost what you call 1,500 young men were leaving every day now for jobs abroad because economic opportunities were not there. And on the top of it, the kids of the well-placed elites and good business houses were arrogantly displaying their ugly wealth. And that also gave them an offense that, look, these guys have done nothing and still they have all these opportunities. So economic trigger has been one of the most important aspects of what has happened in all the three countries. Then it has followed with violence and destruction in all the countries, even in Sri Lanka. They burnt the house of Ranil Wickremesinghe. And they went into the parliament house, they went into the president's house. Bangladesh, we have seen it very clearly. Nepal, we have seen it very clearly. In most of the cases, there has been an intervention of the army directly into the political process. In Bangladesh, it was the army chief who went to Hasina and said, you better pack up. Which means that the elected and legitimate governments had absolutely lost control over the law and order machinery as a whole, including the army. And then what happened that all the regimes which have been thrown out are pro-China. So you see these are the common characteristics in all the three cases which we are looking at. Now you look at Nepal. This migration problem, institutionalized corruption, which you find in other cases also, but in Nepal, hugely, to the extent that last 2-3 years, quite important ministers have been blamed for that. And inquiries were set up on that, but nothing seemed to have been happening about it. Since the Maoist struggle, United Nations and Nepal government decided to absorb some of the Maoists. Some money was given. And how that money was accounted is something which has not been done. Madhav Nepal, another former minister under investigation. Devba's wife and Devba are blamed for corruptions and all kind of charges. So you have very extensive, corruption which is institutionalized. and that has not delivered any results so far to the satisfaction of the people. And the whole government, none for the last 10, 11 years, they did not have the majority, absolute majority of any single party. As a result, they went into coalition. And in the coalition, they almost started distributing state patronage on the basis of their political strength. In Nepalese, they call it Bhag Banda. If in the coalition government is 50%, then 50% ambassadors will be appointed by you, 50% judges will be appointed by you, which thoroughly corrupted the system as it was. So these were some of the what you call basic parts of the structure. And then suddenly the government one fine day banned social media. Now social media has been the most powerful vehicle in the hands of the what you call GenZ generation, which is there. This social media is not only for communicating amongst themselves. This social media has also helped families and societies to keep in touch with their distant young boys and girls who are working outside and abroad. And media has also been used by many people to earn their daily wages. YouTubers and bloggers and many of these. Now, the sudden blocking of the social media has a legal point that these media were not registered. And we are facing this issue in India also. We got some of them registered, some of them are still, they are being denied. You have not done that. So government in a way was right in saying that we just wanted to register them. But not enough effort. They gave them 7 days that you register within 7 days, in which I understand the TikTok registered itself. Therefore, TikTok was not banned. And that became a geopolitical issue, that a Chinese social media channel has not been blocked and others have been, and others are all West-based, US-based. WhatsApp, YouTube, X, whatever. Now this happened, this almost enraged the Generation Z, and they were using it for recent mobilization against the Muni government. And they interpreted this social media ban as a ban on their effort to mobilize dissent against the government. They said government had a vested interest in banning it, and that's why they have so ruthlessly done it. They have not persuaded these social media fellows to come on the board and this and that. And that's why it is, it became a trigger. It erupted. Now, their objectives of this was and constitutional diversion, and later on it became a revolution of the parliament. Now, of course, there is a government, but before that, this is almost unprecedented in terms of the time gap in which the whole uprising has precipitated actions. In hardly, I think, less than 18 hours, that everything burst, and within 2 days, everything was over. And why this suddenly it happened? If you look at it closely, there is a clear distinction between what happened on 8th and what happened on 9th. What happened on 8th, how it started? It started with some of these GenZ groups asking for a peaceful meeting. They got the approval of the government. So they started meeting, and they gave an impression to the government that we would be, doing it very peacefully. We have nothing else to do. And therefore, the government allowed with a minimum of a law and order structure being around. And they started peacefully. And at one stage after their meeting, some of their leaders said, today's job is done, now you can go home. And by that time, there were a lot of other groups who came and joined. And they asked or provoked or encouraged the youngsters to go and get into the parliament because all these thugs are sitting in the parliament. We'll go and disturb them, like that. In that process, there was I think, excessive, brutal use of force against them. I have got the data from somewhere else. The police itself has admitted that it fired 2,200 rounds. They say we fired it in the air, but the deaths have been the very first day. There were 19 deaths right at the Parliament House. People dropped, boys dropped one after another. The dramatic videos, I mean, absolutely like that, which shows that. So this violence angered the Gen Z youth in a very serious manner. And it snowballed into a bigger. And I have a feeling that while this was being snowballed, the other vested interests also used it as a cover to get into it. So they started widespread destructions and fire. But first day it stopped there. I think Parliament was attacked, but then it next day after about 10:30 or 11 o'clock, there was no upsurge. And this is almost everybody has said. The outgoing prime minister said this was a conspiracy, and the outsiders have come. Gen Z groups have come and said that our agitation was, our uprising was hijacked by others, and there were outsiders who have come. The interim government's prime minister has said, Sushila Karki, in one of her statements, said that I can't see that this is only being done by Gen Z group, but it is. What I find is there is a mix of the outsiders and Gen Z. Because Gen Z groups were also very much infuriated by the kind of deaths which had taken place, and no change took place. And army did not come on the 9th at all to control everything. There is some very concrete evidence, including of the Indian media people, that at one stage, when these guys were coming from Mighty Ghar, their place where they were protesting, towards the parliament side, there was a blockade done by the army with fire weapons and all that. But within about half an hour, when they were about a kilometer away, they had all this blockade. About 500 meters away, they still had this blockade. About 200 meters away, and suddenly this blockade melted away. That all the barbed wires were removed, and the army, which has a barrack there itself, went into its barracks or head office, which was there. They walked into it, and the youngsters had a full day without any control anywhere else. There is one more aspect of this kind of a thing. That when this happened, Prime Minister appealed to the army that you please come and take control of Kathmandu. And the reports are that first such suggestion came in the morning itself, once the agitation started after their meeting, peaceful meeting. Prime Minister ignored it. Then around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, another call when Prime Minister said, please come and take control. He declared publicly. I saw it in the Kantipur television. They said, please, I have handed over Kathmandu to army, but the army would not come. And army chief seems to have told Prime Minister, we'll take control after you resign. So by the evening, he resigned. The Home Minister had resigned. And the ban on social media was lifted. This all happened on the first day, until the evening. Still on second day, the army would not come to control the whole situation. And it went totally out of it. And that's why there is a very strong assumption all around in Nepal that this was something which was pre-planned, because the Gen Z youth would not have petrol bombs. They would not have guns to them. Some of them had guns. They had looted not only the parliament and others, 400 police posts were destroyed. and all their dresses, etc., were burned down and everything. So it was a massive destruction which took place, which was not within the capacity of the Gen Z groups at all. And we'll come to Gen Z group in a so this is the distinction which we must keep it in mind. Then 10th to 12th, the army came on the night of 9th, and then they restored peace. The moment they were in action, they restored peace and order. And 10th to 12th for almost 3 days, 10th, 11th, 12th, the system struggled to have an alternative arrangement, interim government, and there are fascinating stories, mutually contradictory stories of how all this has happened. But I'll just figure on one or two which important aspects. And then Sushila Karki who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the only first woman Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, known for her independent attitude, known for her courage to stand up against the government, and known for her honesty and objectivity in the judgments, were chosen, and the interim government was appointed. 3 ministers were appointed to begin with. 4 ministers were appointed. 4 more have been added. She said she would have at least a critical portfolio of defense and foreign affairs are still with her. And there are many other portfolios which have been merged. So the process of formation of the interim government is still in progress. And we must go behind about what all this has happened. So this is what the outcome of the 2 days conflict or 2 days uprising was. Then there are 2 aspects which are important to note it before we come to what happens next. One is the role of the army, which everybody is now pointing out a finger. Now, role of the army, I said, on the first day, they did not intervene until the Prime Minister had resigned. Even after the resignation of the Prime Minister, the army chief did not intervene. Next day, when most of the office bearers were taken under the cover of the army for their protection, the army chief had a meeting with the security officers and the president said, why it is that you are not intervening when the government has already asked? And army chief supposed to have said this to him, that sir, you resign first. We will then take control of the state. The president said, I will not resign. And the president refused to resign because the political party leaders who were still in the army barracks or guest house somewhere they were kept, they were in touch with the president on telephone and said, you don't resign. So he refused to resign. And in the presence of others, when he refused to resign, the army chief had some dilemma to deal with. But then army chief started negotiating with the president. And I think the 2 of them had their consensus on what you call Sushila Karki as the interim government. So the interim government was there. In the process, they also negotiated with Gen Z. And Gen Z is not a homogeneous. There are at least 3 known leaders which are there, and there may be further splinter groups amongst them. The army chief was negotiating with some of them. And one of them said, we will not accept anybody until we have asked our pardon. So they went on, another social media challenge and collected opinion. And that opinion came in favor of Sushila Karki. So they said Sushila Karki, and this is how a consensus, so-called consensus, has emerged. Earlier, they wanted Balan Shah, who is the mayor of Kathmandu, and is known for opposing the government, known for doing good work, known for his honesty and all that. But he must have, when he saw the name of Sushila Karki, he bowed to her and said, I accept her. And withdrew from the contest. But he was very much in the negotiations. And he still is. So this is how the interim government has come. So the question of army is important. First, it is important. There are three aspects of it. One is asking the Prime Minister to go, which means not accepting the elected government. Secondly, asking the President to go at a time when the presidential house is burned down, when Prime Minister's official residence is burned down, when Parliament is burned down, Supreme Court is burned down, Singh Darbar, Central Secretariat is burned down, and several of the business establishments, police stations being burned down. Asking the President to resign means collapse of the system. And therefore, the question has arisen whether army wanted to come directly into the politics and power, or army had some other intentions. And there is one clue to that the army in the negotiations invited one Mr. Durga Prasad. Now, here is a gentleman who is known for his commitment to royalty. He has switched from earlier Nepali Congress to Maoist, Maoist to royalist, but he is known for his commitment to royalty. And the royalty, after seeing the discontent against the elected government and Republican system, they have said the problem is with the Republican system. Remove them, we'll come back and manage it. Now, my submission here is if the monarchy can deliver the goods, it should have delivered for 250 years. Not only that, the Maoist revolution, Maoist insurgency, Maoist rebellion emerged out of the failure of the army. And most of the underdeveloped areas were there where the army. So, more than that, there are other things also. I mean, the way whole palace was massacred of King Birendra. Gyanendra is his brother. He is not supposed to succeed him. But the whole family was eliminated. Within 3 days, the investigations of the palace massacre was concluded. And they just put the blame on the prince, and this is how. So it's a debatable character, to say the least. I have some stories about him. I can share with you later on if you have specific questions. But this monarchy wants to come back. And this monarchy for 6 months have been assertively agitating that this government is useless and we must come back to power. They have had demonstrations, huge demonstrations. There is a political party called Rashtriya Prajatantra Party, which stands up to Praja, stand for Raja and Praja, which stands for the return of monarchy. And with the return of monarchy, they are also calling about Hindu state. This again is a very interesting story. Nepal has not, for all the centuries and years, except in 1962. 60, King Mahendra had thrown out the elected government and taken over direct power. And then direct power was opposed by the popular forces, Nepali Congress in particular, which government was thrown out, in order to gain greater legitimacy. The king brought in the question of Hindu state. Because in a Hindu state, the king is considered the avatar of Vishnu. And this is a narrative which has been propagated several times. So, we have to take this as a part of Vishnu avatar, and being a Vishnu avatar, he cannot be challenged. So 1962, the Hindu state in Nepal was brought into being, and 2008, with the elimination of the monarchy and the new constitutional effort, this went. So this is the short period of Nepal being a Hindu state, despite being a dominantly Hindu society. The culture, civilization is all based on Hinduism, but state was not identified with this religion, which again those forces which are calling for the monarchy to get back are also saying we will also have a Hindu state, and this is an issue which have been raised. So Army Chief called Mr. Persai for negotiations for the interim government. And Mr. Persai himself said that I will be happy to become the Prime Minister because Sushila Karki is not fit for that. So he came and offered himself. Now, Gen Z had totally opposed the revival of monarchy. And they said, why are you talking to him? We don't want to talk to him. Therefore, he was marginalized because Gen Z did not want him to be negotiated with. And the established political parties did not want him to be negotiated. This Rashtriya Prajatantra Party has about 8 to 10 members in the parliament, fifth or sixth in the whole lineup. And the total voting percentage they have is 3 to 4%, less than 5 around. So yes, I mean 5% of the 30 million people are still huge constituency in a way, and you can take demonstrations, show your street strength as it is, but acceptability in the wider Nepali context is debatable, is questioned. So everybody questioned that why the monarchist has been brought out. So I said there are three of these actions of the army chief are being hotly debated. That why did he do that? And bringing the Persai on the table said that probably army wanted also monarchy to come and the old system to go out of it. Now this is what is the scene in terms of the interim government and the role of the army. The second question which is being debated very hotly is the role of external forces. Now, why this is debated? Because both in Sri Lanka and in Nepal, in Bangladesh, the external forces role became rather obvious. I have spoken elsewhere. I have done another study also, not still writing, but looked into it, that this was obvious of the American deep state's role in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, the American ambassador was visible on the demonstration sites, and later on, she was in deep negotiations with the JVP. And it is understood that the present president's visit to US was funded by the US embassy or the US government. And he had, though the JVP is a radical and revolutionary, which has always opposed the United States of America's role in Sri Lanka, but this president is not making this as an issue. So this is about Sri Lanka. And in Bangladesh, President Yunus, or not president, he's convener or coordinator of the interim arrangement, took those leaders of youngsters to President Clinton, introduced them, and I have those documents, which is that he told President Clinton, these are the people who have planned it to bring about this kind of a change. And US, Hasina has publicly blamed the US. And in case of Nepal, Oli has given statements which indicate both a pointing figure on India and also a pointing figure. I'll come to India's aspect in a pointing figure on US. The Gen Z group and one of the dominant ones, and this has now divided the Gen Z group. Yes. One of the dominant group has got huge fundings, which is called Hami Nepal, Abiyadi Nepal, and of Sudan Gurum is the leader of them. Balen Shah, the Kathmandu mayor, is also inspiring them and in close touch with them. And he has frequently been in and out of the US, so he has deep connections. And there are many others who are associated with the US NGOs and INGOs, international non-governmental organizations, and all that. So this is suspected that one of the dominant, most articulate, most organized group is funded by the US, which includes Coca-Cola, There is a name of Barbara Foundation, which people are disputing, but Barbara was, one of the American journalists who came and then fell in love with one of the princes. Others say that this was a honey trap, that a prince was involved there. Then she stayed in palace, then she was thrown out of palace, but she had a lot of money, and by dying, she put a foundation there and said this is what it would. That foundation has also been funding Sudan group. Sudan's work. There are also one or two names which are very illegal arms traders who have also been funding Sudan there. So they suspect the American role directly in that also. And I can go into more details on how CIA has emerged. In fact, I made a presentation in JNU, US and the regime changes in South Asia. Going back from Pakistan, going back from the assassination of the first Pakistani Prime Minister, and so on, Mujibur Rahman and in Bangladesh and all that. But I'll give you some brief account of it. The CIA became far more active under Kissinger's system, which invoked a lot of objections from the Congress in the US. And the Congress set up a committee called Church Committee to go into the activities of the CIA, which are not legal and all that. And from 1946 to 2000, 61 or 64 regime change operations had been done by CIA, which are some direct, some are indirect, and electoral interventions. And this is all in the Congressional Committee, on the Church Committee. Besides, Church Committee says that they do not directly, it's not always cloak and dagger that they directly come, but through seeping into the system by mobilizing dissent, preparing the ground for it. They allow such oppositions. They encourage and support such oppositions to come. And the Church Committee said that they have recruited locally journalists, academics, the electronic media, publishers, and all the soft power systems, including now, because social media did not exist at that time. Social media existing. So this is how it seeps into that kind of thing. So we must keep that in mind. Besides the CIA characterization, and in Nepal, there has also been a role, also in Bangladesh, there has been a role of NED, National Endowment for Democracy, which gives money for voter mobilization, which gives money for electoral practices, propaganda, and they use this money for the protection of rights of the people. So all these soft aspects of the covert operations are being funded. And in case of Nepal, and I have somewhere, I think I have brought it, a statement by one of the senators in the US saying that the NED provided almost $35,000 to for this kind of a purpose in the recent times. So there is the finger is being pointed out. Facts have still to be brought out. Let us be very clear about it, because the government has now set up 2 commissions to investigate that, and a lot of things will come out after the investigations. And also keep it in mind that police has also started collecting the evidence now, and they are appealing to the people to give them whatever evidence they have in terms of videos and interviews and all that. And that evidence is still forthcoming. But with this message, many of the youngsters have started deleting their video. And obviously they are somewhere involved in this. So this is what the finger towards the US, which is being raised there. We are still in the midst of work in progress, but indications are there. So far as India is concerned, the whole question comes back to monarchy's revival and Hindutva state. And RSS openly is asking for Hindutva state. Particularly the UP chief minister is very much in favor of monarchy's revival. Monarchy's revival is also supported by some of the old princely states, like Gwalior, for instance. They have matrimonial relations. And even Rajasthan, they have some matrimonial contacts. And there are people who have sympathy for the monarchy to get back to Nepal. And RSS's offices in Kathmandu, and they have been noticed to be very, very active. Even when Ram Temple was there, the whole Tarai belt and Kathmandu was littered by saffron flags of Jai Shri Ram. And I have gone and seen that. Gone to Janakpur and seen the Janakpur temple and everywhere else. So this is true that they have a huge influence. And they have actively and openly supported the revival of monarchy movement because they see the link between the two. Having said that, so this is what it is. Another question which is now being raised in Nepal, and I'm just reporting it, as I have come across that evidence, that they are saying that the breakdown of the whole system would have also meant an abolition of the earlier constitution. And in earlier constitution, Oli had done a mischief of the Limpua Dhura and Lipu Lake issue inserted constitution. And there is no situation now in which two-third majority would be able to amend it because it has now been identified with nationalism. Therefore, the throwing out of the constitution could also have been in favor of India, and that's why the constitution's abrogation or removal was being talked about. So there is a pointing finger on India that you might be involved through Hinduत्व forces, through this one. But I must make it clear that the government of India has not bought any of these arguments. And during the whole crisis, took a relatively objective position that they should have negotiations, they should bring about peace and settle down. And as soon as the interim government came, Prime Minister Muni himself welcomed it. Actually, he has now even talked to Susila Karthik to say that we'll stand by you so far as any assistance you need in reconstruction or anything else. So this is the position in that the question of external forces, which is hotly debated, and particularly India and US. China already had its influence. And this is true that Oli's government's demise, no tears have been shed either in Washington or in New York. That's also true. Because Oli was known to have brought in the Chinese influence in a big way. And the foreign interest, if at all they are working, as I told you, in all the three countries, the governments were considered to be pro-China. Even Hasina, by the Americans, were considered to be pro-China. We also knew that the Hasina attempt was there to balancing us, but she was catering to our interest, and therefore we did not want to disturb her in one form or another. Therefore, the geopolitical aspect, because South Asia is also caught into the dual geopolitical rivalries. One is US and China. US has been pushing for its MCC in Nepal for a long time, and it succeeded in, but only again thwarted its implementation. So there are, and the last visit, almost 2 weeks before what has happened, Modi's visit to China, where he signed the framework agreement for the BRI, which was hanging fire for last 7 years, and reports which are disputed, debated though, reports that Oli had accepted the GSI, the Chinese New Initiative, Global Security Initiative. And Chinese want Nepal to join hands with Pakistan and Afghanistan to have a across the Himalayas connectivity and all that. So all questions are there. And I think it is still we have to wait to reach firm conclusions. But these are the indications I thought I'll share with you. And I'll stop here.